I found out he'd been cheating on me and it just destroyed me. But yesterday, my ex tried to get back with me, so I lied. r/prorevenge. What is up, guys? Mr. Reddit here, back with another episode of Pro Revenge Stories. r/prorevenge is one of my favorite subreddits, and I really enjoyed making this. So kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've got 3 awesome stories we're reading today from r/prorevenge. Our first story is called Break My Heart, I Will Ruin You. After that, we'll be looking at Neighbors Sued Me After Harassing My Dog for Months, Lost Horribly. And then we'll be wrapping up with She Hated Me and Made Me Think I Was an Idiot. Welcome to our new subscribers, Dean, STR, and Leonasia. If you're new, subscribe now for new stories from Reddit every single day. Break My Heart, I Will Ruin You. This is kind of a recent one, so yeah. I need to type everything out and just get it out of my head. If it's a bit too choppy, it's because it's hard to articulate everything right. I had been dating this guy for 3 years. I was in love with him, and I absolutely believed he was my person. My one. We lived together and spent a lot of time just enjoying each other's company. Well, unlucky me, I found out he'd been cheating on me about 6 months ago, and it just destroyed me. I was crushed and spent so long just crying and trying to make myself numb to it all while I could hear him and his new girlfriend hooking up in the common areas. Or him talking smack to our common friends about how I was overreacting and how I should just get over it. I was angry, and I was hurt, and I felt so incredibly broken and unlovable. Those friends stopped talking to me, so I had nowhere to go and no one to talk to for basically the entirety of this last 6 months. I was alone for every holiday, my birthday, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of it. When I ended up numbing an amount, I began noticing things, and I recorded them. I began taking note that they'd stay up obscenely late, that they were smoking things, which I don't do, but I also don't care when others do. I noticed that they got erratic and violent. I also noticed that she'd leave, and she'd still, very obviously, still be high, to pick up her kids from daycare at around 1 in the morning. I noticed that my roommate was put in charge of her little ones, and she had come back with stacks of $20 bills. Taking note of the pattern, I recorded as much on my phone as I could, and about a week ago, I called the police with the info on her car and that she was obviously high and driving to get her kids. She ended up getting arrested. I thought that it'd be fine and I could leave it at that, but yesterday my ex tried to get back with me. He tried to say how much he misses me, how much he regretted hurting me, how much he just wanted to make up. So I lied. "Oh, honey, it's all right. I hoped you'd come back. I love you so much. Let's just forget every little thing and make up." So he proceeded to attempt to tempt me into making up. And when his last article of clothing was on the floor, I pushed him out of the front door of the apartment and locked the door behind him. Then I got my phone and recorded every single thread he made to get back inside. I have arrangements to move tomorrow, and I just got back from dropping off all the evidence that I have spent 6 months collecting at the police station. The amount of pleasure that this revenge gives me is more than that jerk has ever given any woman, and I'm happy to say that I am satisfied and done. Oh, and he has herpes. Next up, we've got Neighbors Sued Me After Harassing My Dog for Months, Lost Horribly. Several commenters telling me that you guys would enjoy this story. About 6 or 7 months ago, my neighbor got a drone. I don't mind people having hobbies, but for some reason he insisted on flying like the biggest jerk possible. He would hover in front of other houses and windows, try to race cars going down the road, and worst of all, he had a habit of flying his drone in my fenced backyard, buzzing over my dog, diving low just over my dog's head before circling around to do it again. My dog isn't small. He's about 70 pounds and a Malamute, but the drone terrified him, and I was worried what would happen if it hit him. I asked my neighbor several times to please not fly in my yard and explained that it was scaring my dog. He basically told me to get lost and laughed in my face. When it still continued, I called the police. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do other than ask him to please not fly over my house, my property. Finally, in late December, it happened. My dog got tired of his shenanigans and managed to catch the drone right as it was diving towards him. He shredded the drone. The thing was just a jumbled mess of wires and plastic. Neighbor was pretty upset. He stormed over to my house, swearing and threatening me, which I ignored. A week later, I got a summons to small claims court. He wanted $900 for the cost of his drone and an additional $300 for supposedly denying him access to his property. The drone sat in my yard for a couple of hours before it was retrieved. Forget that. He could have hurt my dog. I don't have kids or a girlfriend. I just have my dog, who is my best friend for the past 7 years. That dog has moved with me 3 times, was there when I graduated college, saw me buy my first house and my first new car. I love my dog. Went to legal advice, got some great help from them. Turns out, him suing me was the best thing to ever happen. When we got to small claims court, the judge basically laughed away his claims that I had intentionally trained my dog to attack his drone. But little did he know, I was prepared. I had dozens of photos of my yard showing it was impossible for him to accidentally fly that low to my dog, videos of him harassing my dog in the past, and I had saved all my medical bills from taking my dog to the vet. $700 for an x-ray? Check. Another $250 to sedate him during? Why not? Don't want him being uncomfortable. Full dental exam with tooth cleaning repair. $400. Then there was the cost of anti-anxiety meds and a secondary checkup, wet food for a week in case his teeth were hurt, and extra just for good measure. In the end, the jerk ended up owing me almost $2,000 and now is being investigated by the FAA for not having a registered drone and violating several FAA regulations concerning drone flight. Too near an airport, too close to other people, out of sight of operator, and way above the maximum altitude. Enjoy never being allowed to fly drones again, you jerk. And our final story of the day. She hated me and made me think I was an idiot. Long-time reader, first-time poster. I don't know if this is pro, but it is certainly more than petty. In high school, over 10 years ago, I was quiet and attentive in class. Teachers liked me. I wasn't popular, but I had good friends. I say all this to explain that high school was relatively calm for me. I played sports, was on the student newspaper, and got decent grades. However, that all changed my second semester junior year. I've always been a voracious reader. My freshman English teacher recommended I move up to the honors English track, so I did for freshman, sophomore, and my first half of junior year. Then I was put into classical literature my second semester junior year. I've always loved Greek and Roman stories, and had already read your typical high school classical reading list on my own. I didn't mind reading them again until I met Miss Umbridge. She put on a sweet facade, but she was downright evil. She also decided she hated me. I still do not know why, or what transgression I committed, but she hated me. I assume it was my habit of sometimes nodding off in classes. At the time, I had undiagnosed thyroid issues and was getting up at 5 a.m. for swim practice. I say sometimes because it happened maybe twice a month total between all 8 classes. I don't remember nodding off in her class, but it could have happened. Anyways, her class was 50% essays and written reports. The rest was random quizzes and a couple of tests. I was on the student newspaper, and I was a decent writer. I wasn't worried about maintaining a B or up. We wrote our first paper, and I got a D. I was shocked. The only class I struggled in was chemistry, and still, my lowest assignment grade was a C. After class, I asked Miss Umbridge what I did wrong, because her notes were minimal. She told me my assessment of the material was uninspired. Okay, can you direct me to an example of an inspired assignment? Come back during study hall. Thinking she'd have some example materials for me to review, I got a pass to see her during study hall. Nope. She spent the full hour basically telling me I was an idiot. I remember leaving and crying because she didn't tell me anything constructive. My friend, the eventual valedictorian, offered to help me on my next paper. My friend and I spent hours on my next paper. She never got below an A- on anything. I got another D. My friend was furious. She took it to her AP English teacher and asked him to review it. She said she was entering a writing competition and wanted advice. He said it was great. Her typical A-plus work. My friend, quicker on the uptake, asked me for a copy of my original assignment. She asked her AP English teacher to look it over too, and he said she should enter the first one. This one was still good. He'd probably give it an A-, but the other paper was better. My friend was convinced that Miss Umbridge was treating me unfairly for some reason, and she must not like me. My friend wanted me to tell my parents or my school counselor. A teacher didn't like me? That had never happened. Sure, they didn't all love me, but none had actively disliked me. I decided I'd try one more time, but this time get Miss Umbridge to help me. Despite the previous horrors of spending study hall with Miss Umbridge, I went to her office during study hall 3 times before the next paper was due. She reviewed the paper and gave me tips on revising it each time. She did this in red pen. I took notes. By the time the next paper was due, I had 3 revised versions with her notes in red ink on each one. I got a D+. She smirked and congratulated me on my improvement. I was done. My friend was right. This jerk had it out for me and was giving me bad grades on purpose. I'm a laid-back person, but I was upset. Never before have I been this upset. I took my paper to my newspaper teacher. Sure, he didn't teach English, but our student paper constantly won awards because of his work. I told him I was having troubles in English, and could he please look over my paper and give me advice. He was a little confused as to why I didn't ask my English teacher, but he did it. He also told me it was great and gave me a few minor changes to make. I asked him if he thought it was a B or better. He said he'd give it an A. Not 100, but a solid A. I went to my friend and we brainstormed. I couldn't request a drop or an add. This wasn't college. You don't just switch classes at my high school unless the teacher recommends an honor placement. That's not true, said my friend. The football and basketball guys get moved to easier classes all the time to keep their grades up, so they are eligible for games. The athletics director was a friend of my dad, so I requested a meeting with him and my swim coach after school one day. I told them I was in danger of losing my eligibility to swim because I was pulling a D in a class. I wanted to move classes, but I knew I'd need approval from administration, which I wouldn't get without a good reason. They asked if I had requested help. I explained I had asked for help from multiple people, but my grade wasn't improving. I didn't know what to do. They asked to see my papers. I sat while they read them. They both looked at me confused. Neither of them could understand how those papers were worth only a D. The student vice principal was brought in. He asked who helped me. I explained my friend. He knew who she was, again, future valedictorian, and she had even asked her AP English teacher to look it over for advice. I had also asked my newspaper teacher to help me. Student vice principal asked if I had ever actually asked my teacher for help. I smiled and handed him the 3 revised versions of paper number 3 with Miss Umbridge red ink all over them. He frowned. AP English teacher and my newspaper teacher were pulled into the meeting. They were each asked to grade the papers. All 3 papers got an A- or better. While this was going on, my dad was called in by the athletics director. My dad was upset. He demanded I be moved to another class and that Miss Umbridge be put under review. Clearly, she wasn't grading students on their work, but on her own personal opinions. The school administration obviously bristled at the accusation that a teacher was treating students unfairly. A lot of arguing that I wasn't allowed to sit on occurred in the vice principal's office. I could hear plenty of yelling as 6 adult men argued over the appropriate next steps. It was decided that myself, my dad, vice principal, and athletic director would have a meeting with Miss Umbridge. The following morning, before school, we all met. Miss Umbridge seemed to think she was going to get to tell everyone why I was so stupid. Vice principal explained that if I maintained a D in her class, I would lose my extracurricular eligibility, and we were all meeting to discuss what to do. She smirked and said I should be moved to the non-honors English track, and I had no business being in honors English. I didn't have the aptitude to understand the complex classical literature they were studying, and I probably would need a tutor to even get through basic English. I've never seen my father so red, and I half expected to see steam come out of his ears. Vice principal asked why she didn't try to help me improve. She said it was up to students to put in the initiative to get better. Vice Principal asked if that meant I had never asked her for help. She said I had not. Vice Principal then pulled out the 3 revised versions of paper number 3 and handed them to Miss Umbridge. Now it was her turn to be read. She called me a liar and said those notes weren't hers. Things got heated, and I was asked to leave again. I sat outside the office. This time the secretary was there, and we both heard the shouting. School was set to start in 30 minutes, and they were all just shouting. Then AP English teacher and newspaper teacher were called in again. More shouting. About 5 minutes to the start of classes, the teachers left and I was called back in. If looks could kill, I'd have died then and there when Miss Umbridge walked out of Vice Principal's office. I was being moved to basic English effective immediately. My current grade would not carry over. I would not need to make up any past assignments, and new teacher would be instructed to grade me only on the assignments going forward. My new English teacher, Miss Honey, ended up being the English department head. She was at least 65 and had been doing this for decades. After 2.5 years of honors English, this class was easier than PE. I barely had to try to get an A, but I refused to let Miss Honey think Miss Umbridge had been right. I tried harder in that class than any other class that semester. I finished projects so quickly that I was asked to tutor a girl struggling in the class. I spent half of the class period just helping this girl understand the material. I helped her go from a C- to a B+. I got something like 104 in the class. At the end of the semester, Miss Honey called me into her office during study hall. She was recommending I return to honors English for senior year. I must have looked panicked because she assured me Miss Umbridge would not be my teacher. In fact, she would not be anyone's teacher. She was leaving at the end of the school year. Miss Umbridge was only in her late 20s and unmarried, too early to retire, and my high school was in one of the best-paying school districts in the state. I knew what leaving meant, but Miss Honey still explained that I was put in her class on purpose. The school administration trusted Miss Honey to determine the truth of Miss Umbridge's claim that I was basically a lying idiot. Miss Honey stated I very clearly belonged in honors English. She apologized if her class had not been challenging enough for me. I cried. I mean, full-on ugly snot cried. I didn't realize it, but part of me had actually believed Miss Umbridge up until that moment. Miss Honey hugged me and consoled me. I spent senior year in honors English and spent my study hall tutoring Miss Honey's struggling students. To this day, I think about that awful woman fairly regularly. My career is strongly writing-based, and I still worry obsessively over my writing. I hope she never taught again, because she wreaked havoc on my self-confidence. That's all for now, but don't be blue. I'll be back soon with more stories for you. Remember to listen to Mr. Reddit every night, so your dreams will be wonderful like you are and bright.